Dear everyone, we are joined by the High Commissioner of Jamaica. Can we have a huge loss of applause to welcome Excellency in the beautiful city of Chennai, and especially to discuss today about the concept of climate change. Mr. Subhash, can I request you to please welcome Excellency with a bouquet? And in a very traditional way, that is shawl. You're presenting a shawl, and I believe that after this Chennai trip, you would be having a collection of shawls. We'll welcome the Deputy of the High Commission, Mr. Peter Bailey. A very good evening to one and all present here today. In this conference today, we are going to discuss more about the possibilities of dealing with some important concepts that are there, with the possibilities of enhancing cooperation with different world countries altogether, to talk and deal with a concept which is called as climate change, which is not even affecting one particular side of the world, but the entire world together. And since the beginning of this decade, we have been talking much about this particular concept and dealing with it. In fact, the United Nations has delivered special charter to discuss about climate change and to discuss about the possibilities to enhance cooperation between different countries. In today's conference, we are more discussing it in terms of countries which are packed together on the Indian Ocean side, as well as our partners, to discuss South-South cooperation to deal with this important problem that is affecting the entire world. In today's discussion, we would be having the Trade Commissioner from Latin American and the Indian Ocean Trade Council, along with we have the High Commissioner of Jamaica. We would be soon joined by the Charge d'Affaires from Lesotho. I'm glad to have Dr. Asif Iqbal, the President of Indian Economic Trade Organization, and we have Mr. Ramakrishna, who is a great corporate leader in Chennai, to talk much about the concepts and the kind of dealings that we have with different companies altogether, and how it is going to actually affect trade and economic cooperation in a longer run if we do not deal with this problem. So to begin with the session and talk more about and try to understand what we are heading towards and what is the goal towards leading a kind of information towards dealing with climate change and hence increasing economic cooperation, I would like to invite Dr. Asif Iqbal, the President of Indian Economic Trade Organization, to set this theme for today's conference. Dr. Asif.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mohit. Excellency High Commissioner of Jamaica, Mr. Jason Hall, and our colleague from the Jamaican High Commission, Mr. Subhash from the Indian Ocean Trade Council, and very soon we'll have our colleague from Lesotho, and other diplomatic colleagues, friends of Jamaica, friends of Lesotho. Thank you so much for being here on this very important occasion, as India observes the UN Ocean Day, International Ocean Day, and it was a prerogative for us to address this issue. And also the visit of the High Commissioner, which has been very successful yesterday and today, and tomorrow many more deliberations will happen. On the sidelines of this, we wanted to have him on this important occasion, because climate change is a very important issue and a very important dialogue today internationally. And with India's leadership in G20, Chennai is going to be hosting in the next 3 weeks, Excellency, the largest climate change dialogue as a part of the G20. So there has been a lot of interest, and Jamaica being in one part of the world, so there is a lot of other details that you would be able to understand from His Excellency himself. And as we discuss, the Union Ministry for Environment, Forest and Climate Change, they have also sent us a report for us to launch, which we'll be doing at the later part of the evening. First of all, Excellency, let me express first the gratitude to you for visiting this beautiful city of Chennai in the state of Tamil Nadu, as India observes its presidency of G20, and for the tremendous efforts that your High Commission has put in accepting the hospitality of the people of Tamil Nadu. This morning we had some very good meetings with colleagues from Puducherry and Tirupur, very successful deliberations, and at the later part you will also discuss with Excellency the other opportunities, other trade related mechanisms that we are doing. We have the colleague from the embassy who will also give you much more information about Jamaica trade and opportunities. And Excellency, last year when we had the first India-Jamaica summit, we discussed on India-Jamaican relations. And today, we are addressing and we are responding to this call of, issue of the climate change. And we came forward to have this evening's program as a part of that. as our host, who is heading the Indian Ocean Trade Council, is very, very dear to him, this issue of climate change. And since Indian Ocean covers this particular issue, and we thought, this could be most appropriate, and you will share in some time the Jamaica's viewpoint on what climate change and how it is being addressed, in what way, the initiatives are being taken by Jamaica. And all the other important pledges and commitments that India and Jamaica have worked together for fulfilling this particular climate change issue. Coming year, we'll be participating in the COP Summit, and the last COP Summit in Egypt had India's deliberations very seriously, and how it was designated, our role in playing this. And during that time, the Honorable Prime Minister, our Shri Narendra Modi ji, announced India's aim of achieving net zero emissions by 2070 at Glasgow. Then within 1 year, India has submitted its long-term low emissions growth strategy, indicating low carbon transition pathways in key economic sectors. And responding to the call for increased ambition in our 2030 climate targets, India updated its nationally determined contributions in August. And in 2023, we'll have a latest update on that. We have embarked on far-reaching new initiatives in renewable energy, e-mobility, ethanol blended fuels, green hydrogen as an alternative energy source. Just this afternoon, our colleague Trade Commissioner was saying how 2 degrees more in Chennai this year we are experiencing. And it is really an important issue for us to address and see how we can tackle this all together. We also seek to foster strong international cooperation excellency with Jamaica through action and solutions-oriented coalitions. Of course, you are a member of the International Solar Alliance and the Coalition of Disaster Resilience, both of which are launched and nurtured by India. And this is a testimony to our ethos of collective action for global good. And India, which is a home now to 1.4 billion people, is undertaking this effort despite the reality that our contribution to the world's cumulative emissions is less than 4%, and our annual per capita emissions are about 1/3 of the global average. And our government is taking all steps to encourage EV mobility. And when we during our visit to Jamaica last time, we also discussed a few proposals of setting up EV facilities in the special economic zone in Jamaica. So this is something that we would be able to discuss with certain stakeholders on that platform. And at the heart of India's vision of a safe planet is the One World Mantra, which is a lifestyle for environment, which the Prime Minister set forth in our national statement of COP26. And the mission life was launched by Prime Minister Modi in presence of UN Secretary General. Therefore, the world urgently needs a paradigm shift from mindless and destructive consumption to mindful and deliberate utilization. We are the trustees of this planet Earth, India, Jamaica, all of us together. We must nurture it through sustainable lifestyles that optimize resource use and minimize wastage. As the world's most populous democracy and a vibrant emerging economy, India will seek to lead by example, and we will invite the global community to be part of this mission for family and community-based actions. And Excellency, India is assuming the presidency during this year with the motto of One Earth and One Family, One Future. Our future towards a planet safe for humanity is one that no action can undertake alone. So this collective journey that we have is something that we would nurture and take it forward. We also look forward to your views in the coming session about the climate change, and of course with the ocean, with the Atlantic that is there, and the kind of initiatives taken by Jamaica are really worthwhile, and we would like to hear more on that. And I once again welcome you warmly in this beautiful city of Chennai, and our friends of Jamaica. I would like to thank you all for being here, and looking forward to a successful deliberation this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Asif. And indeed, it is important to shift towards the newer technologies to tackle such kind of problems. And in fact, to know more about the problems which are occurring to the business segment, I would request Mr. B. Ramakrishna, the founder of Corporate Clinic, to throw more light on this and to talk about the kind of problems and how to overcome these problems.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, gentlemen on the dais. I would like to more focus on the business climate changes. I would like to go back to Indian history. In 1991, India opened up. I think everybody knows this issues. So when India started globalizing, one of the major problems that came up was from the finance point of view. All our exports are doing very well, but the only problem which differentiated us from the overseas market was the rate of interest, for example. Now, the first climate change on the finance angle was introduced by then the Finance Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh. So he introduced a product called an external commercial borrowing, which not many of us know. That product is still in vogue. I have raising those products in the market. Now, this product is basically for Indian exporters. They can raise monies from abroad for their trade purposes. It's permitted officially, and there are no guarantees, nothing. So this is one of the first climate change that from the finance point of view, the government of India has announced. Now, after this, if you see the performance of Indian economy, today we have about $650 billion of reserves, which was only $6 billion when in 1989-90, if you all remember. Now, that's a sea change that took place, thanks to Dr. Manmohan Singh at that point of time. Now, after that, the present government has encouraged ECBs for almost all businesses. In fact, not many of us know that an NCLT company can raise this product in their books. You can't raise this money in India, but you can raise it from abroad to correct their NCLT and come back to normalcy. So this is one of the fantastic changes that the government has made, that is the present government under Modi's leadership had made. Other than this, you take, for example, from the business point of view, environment point of view, you take, for example, textiles, you take, for example, garments, you take, for example, footwear, leather, it has become pollution-centric. Yesterday years, nobody bothered about our effluent treatments. Today, the government is very strict on pollution control norms and are very stringent. For example, power generation corporations in lignite and coal-based industries, where the fly ash arrester is mandatory. So you can't just like that, leave off the steam in the air. So you need to necessarily control it through fly ash arresters and other technologies where the emission is very low, carbon emission is very low. Now this is very important. So now what happens is the cost of implementation of plant, which was yesterday year X, has become 1.5x only because of pollution control norms. So it becomes costly, but you need to compete very highly. So what the government has done is brought down prices of, say, for example, funding costs, and also increase the capital cost here. So which means you are still globally competitive. And for that matter, all companies, all countries abroad are looking at those companies to get imports from India, from only those companies who have pollution control norms. That's mandatory. For example, you take prawn exports. You have to have an FDA approval and Euro lab approvals. And unless and until you have these two, you can't export prawns just like that to any other country. So these are very strict norms followed by the government and the industries today. So that's one. The second thing is, from the trade point of view, if you really look at, it has become very competitive. It's the cost structures have gone up, the prices are coming down, the margins are shrinking. But what is going to substitute this is basically from the point of view of volumes as also the quality of products which you have, provided you have stringent pollution control norms to be adopted. And from the point of view of foreign trade, of course, I told you that we have huge $1 billion of reserves, so about $660 million of reserves now. So very comfortable in terms of forex revenues. Now, post-COVID, I think India is one of the best countries who have handled COVID. I think everybody in this global agree. We have done the best in COVID. And we didn't affect our trade at all. COVID has not affected trade at all. And once the logistics started, we've been able to perform very well. Now, these are the few changes that are made. In fact, I would stop with this at this point of time. Any questions, I'm ready to answer at a later point of time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And indeed, it is important to understand the entire climate of business and understanding it with the problems which are occurring to the world. Thank you so much, sir, for your inputs, and definitely, we would like to interact much further as well. Can I now invite our Honorable Trade Commissioner from the India Ocean Trade Council, Honorable Mr. Vadamalai Subhash, to present his address.
Thank you, Mohitji. Good evening to all. Your Excellency, Mr. Jason Keats-Hall, High Commissioner of Jamaica, and His Excellency, Mr. Tabong Lenos Kolomo, Charge d'Affaires, Kingdom of Lesotho, who will be joining us shortly, and Dr. Asif Iqbal, President of Indian Economic Trade Organization, diplomatic colleagues, friends of media, distinguished colleagues, ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very much delighted here to welcome you all on this beautiful day for this event here in Chennai. Having been in the education industry, I'm truly impressed to see the great changes that are taking place today, both in the climatic conditions and the financial sectors as well. The climate change conference here in Chennai today takes place at a critical juncture in climate negotiations. Just few months before the Conference of Parties 28, which is going to be held in Dubai. This high level of participation here reflects this meeting's importance. Yet, our purpose here is not to negotiate, but to have very frank discussions, very open discussions between us about climate change and how we can implement our technology and strategies to prevent this climate change and help avoid global warming. Innovation in low emission technologies still takes place largely in developed countries. Given time, developing countries, well, no doubt, will make increasing contributions to this technological development. But climate change demands urgent action and rapid and wide diffusion. We don't have much time. We have very limited time with us to employ these technological advancement. So more than discussion, we are looking at more practical implementation of these discussions, which can be taken back to these developing countries and that can be implemented immediately in order to avoid the global catastrophes. Yeah. So this full arsenal of climate-friendly technologies should be mobilized for the fight against climate change. International technology cooperation and knowledge sharing can ensure that measured technologies like those of energy efficiency are widely adopted in developed countries. For example, the farmers in Jamaica, an island nation of 3 million, are especially vulnerable. In 2020, Jamaica became the first Caribbean country to submit a tougher climatic action plan to the UN because the country was at risk of rising sea levels, drought, and more intense hurricanes. The Mount Airy farmers enrolled in the United Nations program that helps the resilience of communities and threats such as climate change, poverty, and water insecurity. It is regarded as the first joint program of the United Nations in Jamaica, combining the resources of 6 agencies like the United Nations Economic Program in Mount Airy, the UN program, and other 30 new harvesting systems were also implemented in Jamaica to avoid this global climatic change. Coming to the financial support. Financial support also needs to be scaled up in order to implement these technologies in developing countries. In particular, the most vulnerable countries, which we'll be talking in detail in this meeting. Ladies and gentlemen, the sooner the countries are able to shift onto this low emission paths and strengthen the resilience to the climate change impacts, the better the prognosis for humanity and for our planet. We have a responsibility to find ways through this discussion and deliberation to find these ways to implement it in these countries. This meeting can send a clear message to other nations that there is a way forward in technological cooperation and technological sharing. One that will enable international community to tackle both climate change, poverty, to promote development and save the planet. I hope that our discussions will result in some clear answers which can collaborate with Kingdom of Lesotho and Republic of Jamaica through our Indian hosts. I wish you all a fruitful and a very productive meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. And indeed, it is something which we all are discussing about and which we all are talking about in terms of how to tackle this problem. And it is not something that we have to deal with only India has to deal with, but the entire world. And in today's conference, we want to get more viewpoints of the entire world together. That is important. And with this, I would request for the keynote address by the High Commissioner of Jamaica, His Excellency Jason Hall, to present his address and talk more about this issue.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, Venakam, good evening, namaskaram. It really is such a tremendous honor to be here. When you think about it, Chennai, then Madras, was one of the places where the Indo-Jamaica relationship began, because 2 centuries ago, boats departed from Madras to head to my part of the world. And being in this room now, looking at you all, I could be in a room in Jamaica. You all look so Jamaican, it's not funny. I also trace familial relations back to Chennai from that very same boat. And this is not the first time that I am coming here. I actually did hip surgery here many years ago. Well, not that long ago, 2015 and 2018. And so you might say I've left a piece of me in Chennai. So it's very heartening to be here. This has been a very promising trip from a business development standpoint. There is tremendous potential to be harnessed. And for this, I must commend Dr. Asif Iqbal and his team at the IETO and the LACTC. But having a component that speaks to climate change indicates, or at least deserves, even further commendation, because that is the true reality of any business that we are undertaking. It must be done within the context of sustainability. Jamaica and Chennai, as you've heard, share much in common as having a coastline and being vulnerable to the effects of climate change. Jamaica perhaps a little more so, being a small island developing state. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about our experience, and of course welcome any input from you all. I should let you know that as the son of a forester, I have been an environmentalist all of my life. I grew up in the Amazon to stem deforestation and throughout Africa. And I actually hold a master's degree in coastal zone management from the University of Wales in Cardiff. Coastal zone management is a multidisciplinary undertaking that deals with the interface between the sea and the land, with sustainability as a core tenet. So if you'll allow me to read a few remarks. The devastating impact of climate change has each year become a growing concern to the globe. From mounting heat waves, fires, flooding, and more severe meteorological events leading to catastrophic damage to infrastructure. Jamaica has not been spared from the ravages of meteorological events such as hurricanes, and we are actually located in the second most disaster-prone region in the world. There is therefore an urgent need for countries to revamp their commitment to securing our planet, particularly in keeping the goal of 1.5 degrees centigrade alive, and reforming our production and consumption patterns to protect the environment and its fragile ecosystem. Jamaica, therefore, welcomes the full implementation of the Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework signed in December 2022. This conference follows the observation of World Environment Day 2023 on June 5 under the theme Solutions to Plastic Pollution, to encourage protection and preservation of the environment. In this connection, it is to be noted that the government of Jamaica imposed a ban on the importation, manufacture, and distribution of single-use plastic bags, straw, and polystyrene, which took effect in January 2019. And we have committed to widen its ban on single-use plastic during this financial year to further protect the country's natural environment from degradation and destruction. And I should point out to you that Jamaica's environment is truly a thing of wonder. I think if you all get the chance, you should visit Jamaica. It is beyond paradise because it is not just a physical setting. It's not just the blue crystal waters. It's not the pristine beaches. It's the vibe of the people. It's how we live, our culture, and our music. And of course, our food, which has strong Indian contributions. There's also been a renewed focus by the Jamaican government on adopting a circular economy and employing nature-based solutions to drive climate resilience, to protect and to preserve the natural world, thus maintaining the health of the ecosystem and biodiversity richness. When we look at India's efforts, India has emerged a global leader and champion for climate change, and has to date done tremendous work to raising awareness around tackling the vials of climate change. Jamaica therefore applauds and commends the efforts by India to small island developing states like Jamaica in helping the developing world, particularly, as I said, small island states like Jamaica, to achieve climate change mitigation and adaptation targets through its establishment and leadership of key international organizations and coalitions, such as the International Solar Alliance, ISA, aimed at scaling up solar deployment, and the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure, both headquartered in Delhi and both which Jamaica is signatory to, for the building of climate and disaster resilient infrastructure. India, alongside Jamaica, the UK, Mauritius, and Fiji, launched at the recent COP26 in 2021, the Infrastructure for Resilient Island States, IRIS. This initiative particularly focused on capacity building and technical support for small island developing states in developing resilient, sustainable infrastructure that can withstand shocks and protect lives and livelihoods. We certainly know in Jamaica the frailty of the tourism industry, for example, and thankfully we've been able to rebound after numerous shocks, but still remain cognizant of the constant threats posed to the tourism industry, particularly by climate change. Jamaica has tremendously benefited from these organizations, most recently by way of solar-powered irrigation pump at a farm in rural Jamaica through the ISA's demonstration project, and we continue to develop to benefit from capacity building initiatives through the IRIS CDRI, including IRIS's first call for proposals aimed at equipping governments of small island developing states with needed technical support and knowledge products related to infrastructure resilience. The efforts undertaken by India support key international commitments and initiatives such as the Samoa Pathway, SID's accelerated modalities for action, the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, 2015 to 2030, and the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly goals number 7, which is clean and affordable energy, and number 12, which is responsible for consumption and production. India's political leadership through its G20 presidency has been championing climate change and resilience, and we again applaud India for the establishment of the Disaster Risk Reduction Working Group, DRRWG. Under the Sherpa track of the G20, which focuses on the encouraging collective work by the G20 for multidisciplinary research and exchange of best practices on disaster risk reduction. India, without a doubt, is undergoing a clean energy revolution, evidenced by its ambitions to install 500 gigawatts of non-fossil fuel-based capacity by 2030. Solarization of the Modera village, a model of zero carbon demonstration in rural India, is a prime example of centering equity into green growth and its lifestyle for the Environment Initiative, which seeks to sensitize that the environment is not just a global cause, but a personal as well as a collective responsibility for every individual. That particularly resonates with me because if you note, we as people, as beings, are an individual unto ourselves, which comprises a universe of cells and chemical reactions and molecules, but at the same time, you are part of a greater whole. So you're a whole unto yourself, but you're part of a greater whole, being a member of a family, being a member of a country, being a member of the planet, the universe. So it's a continuous system of agency and communion. India's Union Budget 2023 underscored its commitment to green growth, an example of mainstreaming sustainable development into national policy, which saw a massive commitment of capital expenditure in that sector, including for its green hydrogen mission project, which is indeed very promising. In terms of Jamaica's efforts, we now turn the lens to efforts that we have undertaken, Jamaica, as a small island developing state, continues to support the need for urgent climate action to curb the severe and devastating impact of this phenomenon on our planet. Critical to this end is the need for climate finance from the developed world, including for highly indebted middle-income countries such as Jamaica. It is therefore imperative that the goal of contributing $100 billion per year to climate financing under the Paris Agreement be honored for the benefit of all, including the principle of climate justice. Jamaica's contribution to the reduction in global greenhouse gas emissions is being done by way of its nationally determined contribution, which focused in the first instance on the energy sector. Jamaica's nationally determined contribution was updated in July 2020 to better reflect new climate realities affecting the island, its obligations under the Paris Agreement, and to take into account other sectors such as water, forestry, agriculture, and transport. Jamaica's revised and enhanced NDC targets a 60% reduction in our emissions by 2030 in absolute terms. Jamaica's National Climate Policy Framework, adopted in 2015, has to date successfully created a mechanism for infusing climate change adaptation and mitigation into policies, sectoral plans, programs, strategies, and legislation as necessary. The framework was updated in July 2021 to bring the document into alignment with new realities, including Jamaica's ratification of the Paris Agreement in 2017, the establishment of a climate change division, a climate change advisory body, and a climate change focal point network, as well as changing national priorities in the transportation, energy, natural resources, and built environment sectors. In addition, Jamaica launched in July 2021 an emissions policy framework to establish a coordinated, structured approach to ensuring that Jamaica meets its targets for the reduction of emissions of harmful gases and substances, and to define the country's policy position on outdoor air pollution caused by human activities. And of course, a gender and climate strategy and action plan. This is designed to lay the groundwork for mainstreaming gender and climate considerations into projects and policies as a means of effective disaster risk reduction and strategic development planning. You should know that, especially given gender matters being so important here, a very curious and interesting fact about Jamaica is that we have the highest ratio of female CEOs and heads of businesses in relation to men in the world. In fact, all my life I've had a female boss, including my wife. Jamaica has also advanced preparation for long-term low carbon and climate. Sorry. This is a problem when you're reading from a phone. Jamaica continues to work closely with its bilateral partners and also at the multilateral level to achieve its climate targets and commitments, including supporting key initiatives within the United Nations for financing and building the capacity of developing countries, including SIDS, to meet and build climate resilience. There are a series of upcoming events this year that we hope will help to push forward the need for greater climate action, specifically climate finance. They include, some would have been mentioned before, the Global Summit proposed by Barbados and France on the new Global Financial Pact for the South, to be held later in June this month, aimed at changing how the Bretton Woods institutions view sustainable development. This is a critically important initiative on climate vulnerability. The G20's Leaders Summit, which is to be held here in September, which the world waits with bated breath to see what the outcomes of that will be. The IMF annual meeting in October, and of course COP28 under the presidency of the United Arab Emirates in November 2023, where it is hoped that discussions on issues of climate actions, justice, and financing, including a Marshall Plan for the financing and implementation of mechanism for loss and damage agreement reached at the last COP, which was held in Egypt, can be determined. May the theme for India's G20 presidency, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, one earth, one family, one future, be a guiding principle to consistently echo the urgency for greater climate action to save the motherland and our home. And so, in the words of our own hero, Bob Marley, and to add to the oneness of one earth, one family, one future, I bid you all one love. Thank you.
Thank you very much, High Commissioner. Indeed, it is important to understand the entire problems and overcome that. Before we leave, do we have any questions or anything to add? Any questions from any side? Yeah.
So, myself Prabhu Gandhi Jain. I am a disaster management consultant from Exona International, state president. So the disaster risk DRRG, okay, DRRG you say. Is there Jamaica? Is there any disaster risk reduction? Any best practices, sir? You are managing same time drought is also you are handling and sea rising. Why? Because for India and particularly in Tamil Nadu, drought is an typical and it's we are not faced in so many times. There is any best practices, sir? And another question, sir, is there is any international agency to support like Japan, JICA is there? Like that Jamaica is giving any kind of funding, you said $1 billion like that funding, disaster tackling infrastructure. Chennai is also now is facing a lot of problems. You can see sunking Chennai also, overflood also, drought also we are facing. So is there is any kind of investment support, like how the metro rail in Japan is supported, like JICA, is there any kind of supporting for disaster, specifically disaster tackling infrastructures?
So firstly, thank you for your question. I would say, first off, that the term best practices is no longer valuable. It's all about aligning and fitting a practice to suit a particularly local need. So in Jamaica's case, as a small island developing state versus Japan, which is a member of G20, we may have more Olympic medals than Japan ever will, but we will not be as advanced as Japan has been based on their economic trajectory. In terms of our experience, there are a number of areas that we can share how we have dealt with response to disaster. As you know, when you're dealing with a hurricane, there's very little that you can do other than to be prepared with the recovery efforts. There's nothing that can stop a hurricane from coming. And they are getting stronger and stronger. So even your building code has to be revised. How Jamaica sees all of this and the rest of the world is an opportunity to collaborate, to share experiences, to learn from each other. And this is what we are setting about. The embassy is particularly focused on facilitating these types of exchanges. There was another part of your question which I don't recall, but I think it had to do with the monetary contribution. And within the framework of that discourse, I do not feel that the developing countries are being required to pay or contribute to that. That is a contemplation for the developed nations, because in truth and in fact, it is as a result of that development that we see the level of carbon emission that persists today. So, the ongoing discourse about who pays is a valid one. I think India was at the brunt of some criticism when this argument surfaced, but I think they have put that to rest with the right action that they have undertaken. So we're still not there in terms of determining the modality and how we're going to collect this. Even collecting the funds, as you should know, is not enough, because you could collect $200 billion. It's how you allocate, spend, and manage those resources that is critical. So as we head towards achieving these targets, we're all cognizant of the need for better communication, better cooperation, better collaboration, all with a view to tackling a problem that affects us all. You know, if you look at the blue economy and you look at the sea is perhaps the greatest example of where boundaries of nation and state matter not. Pelagic species of fish do not respect a boundary. They travel the sea. Pollution, plastic, is not confined. The countries that see the plastic washed up on their shores did not generate that waste. And so it is indeed a family effort that requires input from all.
Thank you. Any other question or anything to input? Yes. Can we have a mic? This side. Mr. Kamran is the Trade Commissioner for Australia. Thank you so much for joining. And
Thank
please.
you. I think I must commend both Dr. Asif Iqbal and Mr. Subhash to talk about climate change, because it's so timely that we are going to have a G20 meet on this in Chennai. It's climate change, as we all know, that it's not a challenge for tomorrow. It is actually imperative for today. And achieving net zero, as His Excellency and I think everybody spoke about, is not only, it requires a holistic approach of the governments, businesses, and the communities. I think it's so good to see that Honorable Trade Commissioner Mr. Subhash has started his journey with discussing on this. I think such platforms can get the governments, the foreign governments, the embassies, the businesses, and the communities to talk about this subject, which is actually affecting all of us. We need to know exactly at a community level what are we today and what are we set to achieve tomorrow. Similarly, businesses and also the governments, as His Excellency said, it has to start from standards, best practices, sharing of good technologies. I think it is only the skill and will which will get us to achieve this net zero target. Thank you very much. I'm glad that I was part of this conference, and thanks to Dr. Asif Iqbal to come up with these conferences again. Thank you.
Hi, good evening all. Good evening all. Thanks for the opportunity to take part in this meeting. And I'm Muhsin, and I'm an architect by profession. So adding to the continuation to points of Mr. Kamran sir, I would like to say we have to start the climate change thought process from each and every individual, that too from the schooling stage. Like you have to bring in or feed in the possible aspects, or what climate change is exactly. Nobody knows. If you go to any common place and just start asking, nobody knows what exactly is climate and weather. They don't know the difference between the weather and the climate. Even these two words they don't know. In India, there are a lot of people, 130 crore is there, but the numbers is high, the knowledge is not enough. To be frank enough, we are not into the building with building integrated photovoltaics, which has been a proven concept, and even still it is not into our code books as well. So as you all know, the energy what we are using now is all from the non-renewable resources. Okay, that is meant to operate the industries and the other sorts of trade rather than being utilized by the buildings. But the other way around, if you see, nearly 60% of the energy produced from the non-renewable resources are used for the operation of the buildings, like what we are sitting inside, which is totally a wrong setting. And these kind of buildings, when being built in closer environment, it has to be start from the town planning aspects of city. like you have to regulate the FSIs, you have to regulate the footprints, and all these things sum up, and this forms the urban heat islands, and this will increase the emission levels, not only from the factories or from the automobiles. See, automobiles are all just a component. Even the materials what you use on the facades, like if you use the concrete on the facade, that starts emitting carbon dioxide, which itself is a very bad situation. You have to go into the depths of the knowledge and find out where exactly what we have to teach, and this has to be particularly part of a curriculum starting from the 5th standard or even much below. So you have to start realizing how things will go in the future rather than scoring the marks in the school, and it has to be imbibed in the children because they are the next future for the entire world. Because we are all at mid 30s and mid 40s, we are going to go in the next 10 years. So we have to set the trend at the schooling, which those who are going to come after 20 years or 30 years, and they are going to face the critical situations. And to add up to the point, like what High Commission Sir said from the Republic of Jamaica, I would like to suggest, being an architect, we can start thinking on the regulation of buildings underground when there are a lot of hurricanes are there. So hurricanes will not affect much of the buildings when it is built underground, maybe 3 to 4 meters below the ground. The effect of the hurricanes will pass on above the ground only, so the winds will not affect the structures, which we can start and thinking upon, giving an idea about it. So I will add too much about in the later part of the meeting. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, it is important to have a climate resilient infrastructure, and talking about which we have the possibilities of Solar Alliance, then EV machinery, which is coming up big time in nowadays, and definitely it has to go towards the sustainable energy measures that we have to take, and definitely what you said, to include this kind of topic in the academic industry, that is something really important. Thank you so much. Any other point or any other question? I don't think so. Yeah, please.
Initially, what we are facing today here in India is that the electrical vehicles and the solar panels, all the investment is high on the higher side. So a lot of business people or a lot of people, they don't really invest in that solar and EV technologies. Not only the vehicles, electricity-based technologies. What, as a report which I recently had a chance to go through, the initial cost will fade away eventually when it's used on a long run. But the result that it gives to the planet is huge, rather than looking at it on a financial or a monetary basis. At the same time, the solar investment or electrical vehicle or electric, based production units investment is initially large, which cannot be negated because the lithium and other minerals that go into manufacturing a lithium battery or EV battery is high. But definitely it will, on a long run, down the year, about 5 years to 7 years, it's going to result in a very good way. The biggest advantage is it's going to save us and our children. That's what I think is more important. And that's it. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you very much. We also have the annual report by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. Can we present the report for launching? Can we present the report? We are thankful for the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate, Government of India, for compiling this report on climate change. Thank you very much. very quick question to Mr. Subhash. You know, it is going to be a long time vision of having climate change as an option.
Yes.
And definitely you would be in, you know, in a capacity to deal with these kind of activities, and how you are going to, you know, place the entire, the Indian Ocean Trade Council to put together and this effort in this regard.
Right. Thank you for asking me that question. See, as Indian Ocean, it covers a lot of countries and islands. It's a very big responsibility indeed, and it's not a overnight dream which I can achieve without the support of many people and delegates, ambassadors, High Commission, other people. So it is now that this has been the starting point of this discussion, that we are all here, where we exchange our communication addresses and everything. We can discuss this not only here, and also we can eventually take it to the next level, and subsequently the next G20, which is going to be held for climate change, which is going to be held in Chennai, which is going to be a bigger event. I want you all to come and participate in that event, and I invite you all to come there. And this dialogue, that's what, like I said, only dialogue is not going to make any difference. We have to make implementable decisions and implement it in the right way so that we achieve this. So I want you all to support me and our team here to avoid this climate change. We cannot negate entirely 100% the climate change is not, we can't stop it, but we can eventually reduce it, the emission levels and everything. So it's a long-term plan eventually, which we are going to work out. So thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. In fact, now we are also joined by the Charge d'Affaires from the Kingdom of Lesotho. And as we move towards your speech, I would also request Mr. Subhash to welcome Excellency in this conference with a bouquet and the shawl. That is the traditional way of welcoming in Chennai. And I believe that, Excellency, it is your second trip to Chennai. Thank you very much for joining. In fact, over a busy schedule, he had a meeting, an online meeting with his government. So thank you so much, sir, for joining us. And moving ahead to this concept, and it's like we have had a discussion more about the climate change and the possibilities ahead. I would straight away request you to present a quick note from your side on climate change and the possibilities of collaboration and understanding that we can derive from different countries together, and especially in terms of the remarks from Kingdom of Lesotho, which is popular for its beautiful nature.
Thank you very much for having me. Greetings to everyone who's here. Namaste. I'm really sorry. The meeting that I was attending was supposed to start at 4:30 to 5:30, but now, due to problems of connections, all the ambassadors of Lesotho were having an online meeting, so I just couldn't leave that meeting. It was also very important for me. However, I'll be very brief, just to say Lesotho is the southmost African country that is completely surrounded by South Africa. We are one country inside another, and we are also referred to as the Kingdom in the Sky because of our high altitude. Our lowest point is 1,400 meters above sea level. So I always argue that even if the oceans can drown the whole world, we'll be the last to drown. We have 0% carbon print, 0% carbon print. And I, again, always argue that if you can come to Lesotho, you spend 1 week, you will be younger by a year because of the cleanliness of our water, cleanliness of our air. we live in a pure environment. But very unfortunately, we are also affected by climate change. Climate change does not choose wealthy countries. Climate change does not choose big countries. It affects all of us because the blanket that is surrounding the world surrounds all of us. It doesn't say, you are Lesotho, you have a 0% carbon print, your contribution to the pollution of the environment is zero, and therefore you will not be affected. We are affected. And this climate change is actually affecting us very negatively because we are an agricultural land. We solely depend on agriculture. Of course, we do have diamonds, for your information. But for a living, our people depend on agriculture. Now, this climate change has changed the seasons. There is too much rain in some years, there is drought in some years, and farmers are facing serious problems with this climate change. And my humble message to you, realizing that India is fast growing economically. And if you are not careful, your contribution could be tremendous to climate change. So you need, as you grow economically, you need to also change behavior. And the behavior that one would say should be controlled would be in the use of electricity. If we could make it a point that we switch off lights, we switch off air cons, we switch off fans in the rooms that we are not using, that would be a contribution. If we could also reduce our eating, because the more we eat is the more we need production of food. So that food is produced using energy in most of the cases. That food is produced by deforestation. And if we consume a lot of food, we are also contributing to climate change. And again, manufacturing also, you are aware that energy is also needed in manufacturing. So even if we can get wealthy, let us not be wasteful with our resources, because that will also be continuously contributing to climate change. And lastly, you are one country that is blessed with technology. You are now producing electric cars. Surely there's no point that India doesn't go all out to go for electric cars. And I've since learned that the problem is with charging. So I think a government here has to come in to help with charging, so that charging stations are all over, so that people don't get scared now. If I'm driving a long distance and then my vehicle runs out of electricity, I'll get stuck. So I think those are the small challenges that could be addressed if we tell ourselves that we are going to go all out for electric cars. And remember, we have 0% carbon print in Lesotho, but climate change has harassed our lives in Lesotho. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. And indeed, it is a topic that we have to continuously discuss and keep on talking about and keep on understanding the new solutions for the problem of climate change. Thank you very much for joining us today. Please join us for the networking dinner as well. And before that, can I request to everyone to please join us at the backside in front of the backdrop and the flags. And we can also have a group picture there. Please join us. I would also take this moment in the presence of all the dignitaries and the High Commissioner and the Charge d'Affaires. We would also like to honor our Trade Commissioner for Indian Ocean Trade Council. Can we have the certificate, please? Thank you very much. Can I invite everyone to please join us for a quick group picture?